Zac Brown was born July 31st, 1978 in Atlanta, Georgia, and was the 11th of 12 kids. When Zac was 8 years old, he was given his mother's guitar. His stepfather at the time was a dentist in their small town of Cumming, Georgia, which at the time when Zac was about 8, Cumming, Georgia only had a population of roughly 7,000 people, so it was definitely a small town. One day, his stepfather was making small talk with one of his patients while he cleaned his teeth and told him about how Zac had just been given his mother's guitar and was trying to learn how to play. And in true small-town fashion, the patient offered to give Zac guitar lessons for a small fee. After 2 years of lessons with this guy, Zac realized he had a real knack for music. And not just music, but bluegrass music specifically. Zac's biological father actually already played the guitar. On the weekends, Zac would visit his dad and his brother, and they'd all play the guitar together. Mostly, Zac would just pick the guitar, but in his mid-teens, he decided to seek out a vocal coach from his church to help him further develop his skills in singing along to his guitar playing. Funny enough, James Taylor was a huge inspiration for Zac Brown. As he made his way through high school, Zac started playing solo gigs at local venues and would often cover James Taylor's music. When Zac was 15, he opened a show for an Atlanta musician named Sean Mullins at a coffee house, and he and Sean would continue to be friends for years and years and years following this. Zac's first solo gig was just a few years later at a local pub in town called the Dixie Tavern, which eventually led to Zac becoming part of the weekly entertainment there, and he played every Tuesday night. He played his first gig there for just $175. Zac would eventually meet his songwriting partner, Wyatt Durrett, at the Dixie Tavern. Wyatt also lived in Atlanta and was a bartender at the Dixie Tavern, where Zac Brown was playing every Tuesday. Wyatt's father was heavily into country and bluegrass music, but Wyatt had developed a spark for songwriting after his sister took him to a Jimmy Buffett concert. By the way, if you have not seen my Roots documentary on the story behind Jimmy Buffett's song Margaritaville, I will link it up in the corner of this video and in the description down below. There's some opinions on how he wrote Margaritaville. My Roots documentary is the true story, I assure you, so go ahead and check it out if you haven't already. Wyatt and Zac Brown had quite a bit in common, especially the fact that they both came from big families. Wyatt was one of 8 kids, while Zac, if you remember, was one of 12. Zac and Wyatt also shared the same taste in music, country bluegrass with this island vibe that was coming from Jimmy Buffett at the time. When Zac was 18, he started his own band and called it Far From Einstein, and continued his education at West Georgia University, where he switched his major not once, not twice, but 3 times. After September 11th in 2001, though, Zac realized that college just wasn't for him. So in 2005, Zac Brown self-released his first album called Homegrown while still playing at the Dixie Tavern. This first album, Homegrown, should not be confused with his hit single, Homegrown, which appeared in his 2015 album, Jekyll and Hyde, just a side note. Now in 2006, when Zac was 28 years old, he was playing a New Year's Eve show at the Dixie Tavern when he met his first wife, Shelley Brown. The two ended up sharing a New Year's Eve kiss that night, and Zac Brown would later go on to say that he knew that night that Shelley was, quote, always the one. Shelley graduated college later that year, and within 12 months, the two were married. Just 1 year later, they welcomed their first child, named Justice, into the world. A year after that, Lucy. Lucy was born in 2008, which was the same year that Zac Brown was turning 30. Also in 2008, Wyatt was on vacation with a bunch of friends one night down in Key West when he suddenly got the idea and the most famous line for the song, Toes. Wyatt said that on the 3rd day of their vacation, he just turned to his friends and said, I've got my toes in the water, ass in the sand, not a worry in the world, a cold beer in my hand. Life is good today. Life is good today. He said that word for word. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. So while Wyatt is having epiphanies at 3 a.m. on a beach in Florida, Zac Brown, meanwhile, was playing a show back in Atlanta, Georgia. Zac got out from the show around 2 or 3 a.m. and was driving back to his house, which was a 4.5-hour drive. And it was around 5:30 a.m., about 2 hours into his drive, when Wyatt called him in the middle of the night, or early morning, however you want to look at it, and told him he had the idea for the best song in the world, and they had to record it as soon as he was back from Key West. Almost exactly 1 year later, in 2009, the song Toes was released to the public. It ended up being the #1 single on Zac's second album, which was also his major label debut album, called The Foundation. The Foundation ended up charting to #2 on the US Top Country Albums and #9 on the Billboard 200. It also featured the hit songs Chicken Fried and Whatever It Is. That album would go platinum a total of 5 times. The success of Zac Brown's first major label album was unprecedented. So he and his wife Shelly took the 2 years to just bask in the success of The Foundation. Zac was obviously busy promoting the songs and playing them all across the country. And after 2 years of riding this success and fame, they welcomed their next child, Georgia, who was born in 2010. And then soon after that, Joni, who was born in 2011. They would also have one more child named Alexander in 2014. Between 2014 and 2018, the Zac Brown Band would release 4 more albums, almost one every year, each one going platinum at least once or twice. However, in 2016, Zac kind of started to lose his footing. The beginning of 2016 started out really well. He was planning a tour for that summer, but one night at a Palm Beach hotel, Zac Brown was part of a drug raid when officers charged into a hotel room there and busted 2 or 3 people with cocaine charges. Now, Zac wasn't specifically listed on the police report, but he was mentioned in the 911 call. So it wasn't immediately obvious if Zac Brown was in the hotel room when the drug bust happened, if the people who were arrested were acquaintances of his or not. But nonetheless, it made the news and didn't look good for Zac Brown. Zac Brown was honest and frank about everything that happened. I mean, at least we think he was. He was quick to tell the media that, quote, nothing good ever happens when you stay out late. His full statement actually read, quote, my dad always said nothing good ever happens when you stay out late. It's a lesson I learned the hard way last week, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I attended a private gathering at a Miami area hotel and had only been there for a short time when police officers arrived and arrested 2 people in the room who had just showed up a few minutes before. I did not know these people and had no idea that there were drugs in their possession. I cooperated fully with the authorities and am not part of any ongoing police investigation. Everyone is responsible for their actions, and I regret using poor judgment and putting myself in that position. People still kind of speculated if he was telling the truth, if he really didn't know that those people had cocaine, or if he did know, was he participating? Was he really just oblivious? It's also unclear if he had a pattern of staying out late and partying, and if that could have contributed to the trouble that started to develop in his marriage with Shelly. Because 2 years after the 2016 drug bust made the news, Zac and his wife Shelly announced that they would be getting a divorce. A year after his divorce, he released the Owl album, which only brought in about $100,000 compared to the almost $2 million that came in from the album that featured Toes. In 2021, he released another album called The Comeback, which honestly didn't really present itself as much of a comeback. In 2022, Zac turned 44 years old and married 31-year-old model Kelly Yazdi. By the way, she looks very similar to Shelly. He is still involved in the music scene, but it's undeniable that his massive fame and what he will probably always be remembered for was the song Toes. For more music history like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell icon. And I'll see you on the next Roots Rockumentary.
Hungry for the road all my life, thirsty for adventure all my youth, chasing all my freedoms.